Kevin, if you allow me, is what we believe is we need to build synergies and harmonize on these various initiatives so that they will complement each other and we can attain both objectives of the AFSEM CMP and the Mission 300. And I thank you.
Thank you very much, Kazaura. Next, I'll go to Secretary of State, Jochen Fraschbach of Germany's Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, or BMZ. We've heard from the AUC of the efforts they are making to develop CMP and the Africa Single Electricity Market. But we also understand that BMZ is finalizing a 16.5 million euro project that is aimed at strengthening key Pan-African actors and supporting the Africa Single Electricity Market and CMP. Please tell us more about this project because it becomes a very interesting part of the jigsaw.
Thanks a lot. Good afternoon to everybody. I just want to continue where I ended in the previous panel when I said apart from the financing, also regulation is essential. And I would say the African single electricity market and the CMP are very much in the core of what needs to be done cross-border on the continental level. I would go even a bit further. BMZ is not only cooperating in the energy, on the energy markets and energy systems with our African partners, but also on the establishment of the African Continental Free Trade Area. And I would say, no, I am convinced it's impossible to create an African Continental Free Trade Area without a single African electricity market. And it is also impossible, or maybe not impossible, but extremely cost intensive to reach Mission 300 or even more the overall 2030 agenda target, providing electricity for each and everyone, not for 100 million, not for 200 or 300 million, for each and everyone. So also for this one, the integrated market is essential. And maybe I can share here from the European perspective that without creating the single European electricity market, our German energy system would not be as advanced as it is now. It would be much harder to reach our goal of carbon neutrality by 2045 without this integration on the continental level. And as we are convinced that this is the right way to go, apart from our bilateral cooperation, regional cooperation, the support for the African Union institutions on creating this ASFAM and CMP is of highest value for us, and therefore, as you said, I try to avoid in the first session to come out with all the numbers, what we are providing, how many millions and billions and there. But here I think, although it's not the biggest number I could mention, 16.5 million technical assistance to the AU level as well as for the South African power pool to go along this way is something I'm really happy to announce here, and I hope that this will be a fruitful way forward.
Thank you very much, Secretary of State. That's a true partner who has seen our vision and has decided to join us in actualizing that vision. Before we go to somebody else, I think Director Amin, we've heard from Kamugisha or Kazaura on AFSEM and CMP, and we've also heard that Germany is going to give you additional resources, or give us additional resources to further develop these tools. I think at the end of the day, the aim is to convert CMP and AFSEM into tangible physical assets that will interconnect the entire continent. What is AUDA NEPA doing in this regard?
No, it works. You don't have to switch.
Just talk.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. Speaking here on behalf of Madame Nardos Bekele-Thomas, our Chief Executive Officer.
Just hold on.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm speaking here on behalf of Madame Nardos Bekele-Thomas, our Chief Executive Officer at Oda NEPAD, actually, to make sure that we move the implementation of the CMP AFSEM. We are basically investing, as of now, with the support of African Development Bank, but also BMZ and other partners, in two things, which is the phase 3 of the CMP. Number one, strengthening building capacity of member states, utilities, but also regional power pool. That's number one. And then number two, at the same time, investing into long-term planning. The objective here, obviously, is to strengthen national and regional transmission network. As you know, we really need to invest about $30 billion in a transmission system between now and 2030 so that we can unlock the path for achieving the objective of the CMP. We need as well to scale up renewable energy projects, invest more in solar, wind, hydro, so that we can actually achieve the projected objective of 653 gigawatts of clean energy needed by 2040. And we are doing that through investing into early project preparation. And that's what actually Oda NEPAD does, again, with the support of our partners. And another aspect is to fast-track the cross-border interconnection. This is crucial. We are focusing on critical regional projects, such as operationalizing the East African Power Pool, but the Central Africa Power Pool, but also the North Africa Power Pool, by bringing them actually support. And we are also supporting the independent power transmission operators. This is extremely important. The objective here is really to attract the $1.3 trillion, which is actually needed to increase our power generation capacity. But to be able to do that, we also need really to fast-track the investment needed to build and operationalize the national and regional and cross-border transmission lines. That's actually the job we are doing at Oda NEPAD. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll come to you next, Joseph. We've heard about this concept of CMP and AFSEM. Now we think about real connections. Joseph Nganga is the Vice President of Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet. You have been leading engagements with governments in the past few weeks on the Dar es Salaam Declaration. Based on these engagements, how do you envisage that the Dar es Salaam Declaration will complement or help or operationalize the continental initiatives such as AFSEM or CMP that you've heard about?
Thank you, Vice President Kevin, and thank you for having me on the panel. I think the declaration captures exactly what the CMP and the AFSEM seeks to achieve, which is a clear confirmation that the work that's being done is critical to Mission 300 and to achieving electrification. Why do I say that? Because of three things. One of the 5 principles in the declaration is regional integration. Why? Because you extract a lot of value from leveraging each other's resources and assets in the most optimal way. You cannot do that without regional power pools. You can't do that without the Continental Master Plan. And so that is perfectly aligned. The second is the declaration's point seeks to drive private sector engagement. Private sector, particularly large-scale private sector, wants to build large projects. Large projects oftentimes are too big for just one country. By being on a regional power pool, you're able to supply hundreds of megawatts of solar in a very efficient way, thus lowering the cost per kilowatt hour, while ensuring regional power sustainability. So that's the second bit. And the third bit, I think, is in terms of policies and regulations. Governments, presidents tomorrow in the declaration will sign off on their commitment to implementing the right regulatory environment to drive Mission 300, of which one of them is regional integration. If a country prepares its policies and regulations only for themselves, they might lock out the optimization by regional integration. So by looking at it from a regional perspective, the policies and regulations will be encouraging for the AFCENT Continental Master Plan conversation. We have had conversations with private sector, civil society as well, to make sure they support the declaration, and you will hear the same exact points being mentioned. So incredibly complementary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joseph. I think now we've developed the concept of CMP. We've decided that we can actually have the physical assets, but now we need the money. So that means I come to you, Dr. Kwakwa, World Bank Regional Vice President for Eastern and Southern Africa. The Continental Master Plan projects that the cumulative investments of approximately 1.3 trillion will be required for generation and cross-border transmission infrastructure by 2040. By any stretch of imagination, that's a lot of money. What do you see as the role of MDBs, such as the World Bank and the African Development Bank groups, in implementing the Continental Power Master Plan to ultimately actualize the Africa single electricity market and translate it into a reality?
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to be on this panel. Before I come to your question, let me say again what has been said by previous speakers, and particularly Joseph, the importance of power market integration and power trade in Africa. I think increasingly this is seen as a cornerstone of sustainable development on the continent. It will allow us to tap and to share economical sources of power and also promote energy security. So it's super important for what we're trying to do, the Mission 300. It's been very nicely explained. And I personally feel that Africa as a continent has the resources it needs to provide access to every single African and also to power the economies on the continent in a way that really drives growth and development. But we can't do this without integrating our markets and trading our power resources. So super important. You've talked about, and that's why, as Joseph said, it features prominently in the declaration. It also features prominently in the energy compacts that the countries are preparing. And so all of us recognize this and accept it. And I thank you for the work that Oda NEPAD is leading in this regard. Now, what role for MDBs? I think MDBs come in a variety of ways. First, as you said, or alluded to, the financing, so bringing the money, and particularly helping to tap concessional money, both from the AFDB, from the World Bank, of course, from other partners. But it's not just about bringing money. I think the volumes are important, and we're all stepping up on the volumes. It's also important that we're working in a way that we use concessional money to catalyze private money, because you need both public and private resources. The amounts are huge. So that's one thing. And we also need to work in ways that bring innovation. You know, we can't do business as usual if we're really going to accelerate the pace of electrification and the integration of the market. And so all of these are important, and this, I think we recognize. Mention the policy and regulatory support that needs to come. And this is another area where MDBs like the World Bank and the AFDB can support and building the capacity of operators, enforcing regulations, the ability to enforce regulations and really make the markets function well. I would say that a very important element also is partnerships. You know, nobody can do it alone. The World Bank can't do it alone. The AFDB can't do it alone. We have to really work together to make this different and to make this work. and to get to the single market that we're seeking to do. Let me quickly give a couple of examples of some of the work that the World Bank has been doing. I would say first, just in terms of volumes, for the market integration agenda, between 2017 and now, we've mobilized about $7 billion for the market integration agenda, a lot of it in concessional money. To give concrete examples of some of the projects, we've just in 2022 saw the achievement of the Kenya-Ethiopia interconnector, which is now allowing Kenya to buy up to 200 megawatts from Ethiopia, and that could go as high as 400 megawatts. And again, that was done in partnership, not just by the World Bank, but with AFDB, and then with Agence France Développement. So partnerships are super important. We also have the Malawi-Mozambique line that is going to get completed this year. That again is a partnership with the World Bank, with the KfW and other European partners. And then we're also playing in the policy and capacity building space through the support of generous partners like Norway, Sweden, through ESMAP support. So these are some of the things that we've been doing. Going forward, we're stepping up and we're going to do more, aligned with Mission 300. And particularly moving from project-by-project approach to long-term program approaches. And so we've recently launched what we call the Regional Energy Trade, Transmission Trade and Decarbonization Platform, which will run alongside Mission 300 for at least the next 5 years, a little bit more, which is an effort to really provide support, accelerated or enhanced support to the Southern African and the Eastern African power pools. So we're calling it Retrade, and I'm pleased to say that just last week our board approved a 1.26 billion of the Retrade for the Southern African power pool that will really, over some years, support the development of energy trade in the Southern African power pool. The first project that's been approved is the Zambia part of the Tanzania-Zambia-Kenya corridor, which is super important because when it's achieved, it will bring into being the last part of that corridor that links East and Southern African power pools, which will create geographically the largest power market globally. So that's really transformative and would really make a huge difference. And of course, we're working with others. In terms of innovative financing, we're working with IFC to put in place this transmission infrastructure finance facility, which is really the blended finance idea of bringing concessional resources to help address some of the issues around high risk and the cost of transmission infrastructure for the private sector, so that you incentivize the private sector to come in and do some of what it needs. I think at the center of this is really looking at transmission as something that the private sector can do. In the past, we've always looked at this as public sector, but part of the innovations is really coming in and supporting private sector to do more, and there is scope for that to happen. So let me close again by stressing the partnerships between, of course, the public and the private philanthropies, but importantly, the partnerships between the MDBs. And we're working closely with the AFDB in Mission 300, and we'll look forward to doing some more to make sure that we can seize the opportunity of market integration to achieve the bold ambition of Mission 300. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victoria.
Thank you.
Being an electrical engineer, I can actually see electrons flowing from Ethiopia, Kenya, through the Kenya-Ethiopia interconnector, to Tanzania, through the Kenya-Tanzania interconnector, from Tanzania to Zambia, through the Zambia-Tanzania interconnector, and to the Southern African power pool. I think this is what we are
this is the essence of the Africa Continental Power Master Plan. And I think the infrastructure is going to be in place and result in actual trade throughout the continent. So I think finally, Mr. Francesco La Camera, who is the Director General of the International Renewable Energy Agency, I have one question for you. How can frameworks like the Africa Continental Master Plan and the Africa Single Electricity Market act as catalysts for achieving the goals of Mission 300, and how is IRENA supporting these efforts?
So thank you, Kevin, for your question, and also for having IRENA here in Dar es Salaam. You know that, first of all, I like to commend the African Development Bank, the World Bank, for the 300 million initiative, and try to put the contribution of IRENA in the context that I'm presenting briefly. So first of all, we have to understand why Africa has been kept out in some way from the energy transition and the strong development of renewables around the world. We know that really a minimum part of investment in renewables has been made in the continent that has potential to provide 1,000 times the electricity needed by the world. In our point of view, there are three structural barriers that are slowing the progress of renewables and the energy transition in Africa. The first one is the lack of infrastructure. We are complaining that the cost of capital is very high. Sometimes I always like to repeat that the cost of capital is not the illness, but it's just the symptom. So the fact that it is so difficult to invest in Africa in electricity. And why? Because there is a structural lack of infrastructure. What I'm trying repeating now from a few years, that when the process of reform of the multilateral financial institutions, the question is not only to have more inclusive decision-making processes or provide for having more loans or grants. The problem is for what? In my point of view, the multilateral financial institutions should be focused on the building on the infrastructure that is needed to support the new energy system that is coming. This must be the focus of the multilateral financial institutions. Also them, they have not the capacity, the financial capacity for doing that. But if there is a clear plan on what they intend to do in Africa, it will be much easier to associate the private capital and leveraging and work on the basis of partnership. So the first thing, in my point of view, is infrastructure and as a principal focus of the multilateral financial institutions. And then we go to the second barrier that we see, the lack of the market that is designed for having more renewables. And if you don't have a single power market, how this could happen? It will not happen. So first, infrastructure. Second, work on policies and legal environment that allow the market of electrons works. Third is that a distributive energy system is much more resilient, based on renewables, is clean, and provide 3 times jobs that usual investment in fossil fuel on others. But the fact is that it could be also more difficult to manage that essentialized energy system based on fossil fuel. So we need to have institutions that are ready to manage this kind of system. We need professionals that are fitting with the needs of the new energy system. So these are the 3 main barriers. And so this is the reason the 300 million initiative is fitting well, and what we are doing. So the fact that IRENA has been proud partners of the building of the Continental Master Plan, we have provided with the atomic energy, the modeling for that. I think this is a very significant step in this direction. as has been important in our point of view, without NEPAD, all the training activities they are performing to make the institution able to manage what is coming, and sort of to be leading on that. So this, we think, is important, the Mission 300, because it's fitting exactly in this context that we wish to guide. And what IRENA can do more on that. You know that following the Africa Summit in Nairobi in September 2023, we have launched the Accelerated Partnership for Africa. That is working well. We have, under the leadership of Germany, Denmark, the UAE, and the US, and the leadership of 11 countries that today are part of APRA, and we will be 15 before the summer. I think this could be try to connect with the compact exercise, because we have seen in our investing forum in Nairobi how this is working well. Now we have pipeline of projects. We are trying to make this project to be bankable. So there is a kind of a good line of work. And we also put in this our ETAF, our financial platform that has now 14 partners, including Africa 50, including the World Bank, including with the IFC and MIGA. I think this could be another instrument. So please present project to ARENA. We will try to work with you to assess, prepare the document for the bankability, assess the bankability, and going forward. And just to say them, in closing, how good has been the APRA initiative, that we are trying to showcase that. So we have launched with, in Azerbaijan, in Baku, an initiative, similar initiative for Central Asia. We will launch it at the end of this year, another initiative for Southeast Asia, but trying to remain to Africa. So, first, infrastructure, crucial role of the multilateral financial institutions, and all are we ready to work together for making this initiative to be a success. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I think we are coming to the end of the panel session, but I'll still ask just one generic question for all of you, and in particular for Victoria and Joseph and maybe Kamugisha, because we are partners in the Mission 300. So if you look at your crystal ball and envision this Africa Continental Power Master Plan has been developed, fully developed, and throughout the NEPAD and other partners, we have been able to build this infrastructure that facilitates this market trade. What is your vision, especially with regard to Mission 300? Let's start with you, Joseph, then Victoria, and then we'll come to you. 1 minute each, please.
Thank you, Kevin, and it's a very interesting question. I will answer it by quoting the Minister of Power from Nigeria, who in a panel somewhere in Barcelona said, if Kenya's peak demand is 4 hours ahead of Nigeria, and we each have 4 hours of peak demand, why are we both building peaking plants? Why can't we leverage each other's infrastructure to finance, to actually use the power more efficiently? That can only happen if you have a continental master plan and you have the infrastructure such that the peaking plants in Nairobi are available when Nigeria needs them. So my vision is we have the infrastructure, physical, in existence, and I'm delighted that we're now moving towards private sector investment in this infrastructure, but also the trading mechanism to optimize for every country's needs so that we get the cheapest electron, we maximize the capital asset utilization towards a more competitive electricity market. Our continent will only develop if we have affordable power, and this is one key part of that.
Thank you. Victoria?
Thank you. Look, I mean, first of all, if it's been achieved, that's super exciting, and it makes everything much easier. What I would like to see is essentially a point that the minister from Nigeria raised this morning, that he's trading and not getting paid. You know, so how do we make sure that there are good rules of the game that encourage countries to trade? And nobody's saying, well, I can't get paid if I put my power out and I give it. And you have a situation where sometimes countries can be exporters, sometimes they can be importers, depending on what their countries are going through, climate factors and so on. And so everybody benefits. And together we're pulling the continent forward, we're providing the access to individual households, and we're also powering our economies to pull this continent out of poverty and into prosperity.
Thank you very much, Victoria. I think Amin, very quickly, and finally Kazaura.
Thank you very much, VP Kevin. For ODANEPAD, first, I would like to reemphasize that we consider M300 as a step toward the achievement of the objectives of the CMP AFSEM, multiply by 5 our power generation capacity and ensure universal access by 2040, while complying with our commitment toward just and equitable transition. That's number one. Number two, of course, as an organization, we are going to continue to contribute to it by making sure that our member states have really the capacity. And that's the reason why, and it was reminded by the DG of IRENA, why we are also investing very much into early project preparation, because early project preparation is the best tool, instrument to make sure that we de-risk projects so that we can actually really go toward that. And then thirdly, our vision, of course, is to make sure that those who can produce the cheapest and in a stable manner would actually contribute to give access to those who cannot produce. That's the reason why we are promoting AFSEM. So all in all, for us, M300 is a step and a strong, solid step toward the realization of CMP AFSEM by 2040. Thank you.
Thank you, Kazaura, but also address Agenda 63, how this mission 300 fits into your Agenda 63, and we'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I can think two quick things. One, what we envisage in 2040, once the AFSEM, CMP, the M300, and all the other continental initiatives are in place, that first thing, that we'll have electricity tariffs which are affordable throughout the continent, not the mismatch of tariffs we have, if you go to south, north, east, or west of the continent or central. The second aspect is we will have increased generation of renewables in our energy mix, and further, the continent further continues to be the lowest contributor to greenhouse gases emission in the world. So these are the two aspects which I can quickly envisage to see will happen in the next 15 years once we have AFSEM, CMP, M300, and all the other initiatives we have fully operational. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you'll all agree that we've had a very invigorating and insightful panel. Please join me in giving them a very hearty round of applause.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's do the exact same for Dr. Kevin Kariuki for an excellent job of moderating. Thank you very much, sir. Might I invite all of you for a photo opportunity, if I can invite you just to step forward, and the official photographers to please come and facilitate the photo opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, if I might have your attention while that photo opportunity is underway, to explain the final part of our program for this afternoon. We are now going to transition into a short series of really brisk and really concise conversations. We're going to be calling up onto the stage the moderator and their panelists, in most instances 2 or 3 panelists at the very most. And the view here is to really shine the spotlight on some of the challenges and opportunities in the sector. Before I call up our first of these sessions, let's please give our panel a final round of applause as they descend stage. Thank you very much. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Madam, thank you very much. Standing by now, ladies and gentlemen, to speak to the question of off-grid and the productive use of energy, it's my pleasure to invite in the role of moderator Manoj Sinha, the co-founder and CEO of Husk Power Systems. And as Manoj comes up, thank you, Manoj. Please let me also call on Clemens Callis, the CEO of Signum Capital, as well as Matthias Charles Yabe, the CEO of AcoFresh. Let's give them a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, please. Thank you very much.
Just so you know, I'm taking my CEO's place, William Brent. Just so you know.
And you're taking this? Okay, William Brent. Okay. Just a quick, a small deviation. William Brandt is standing in for his CEO, Manoj Sinha, and will therefore take on the role of moderating this session. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, inviting you to lean in to engage. These sessions are going to be fast-paced and short, and so we're looking forward to your attention and your participation. Over to you, William.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here. As mentioned, this is going to hopefully be a fast-paced discussion. I am not going to stand at the podium, but sit here with the other panelists. We have an interesting mix of people here. We have a very early-stage company working in Ghana and looking to expand into additional countries in Africa, doing cold storage and e-mobility. AcoFresh, and we also have one of the leading debt providers in our space, Signum Capital, Clemens Callis, as mentioned, and I'm William Brent, the Chief Marketing Officer at Husk Power. We're a growth stage mini-grid developer, so it's a little bit of an interesting combination on both on the practitioner side, but also on the finance side. So I think I'd like to kick off this conversation. You know, there's been a lot of discussion around productive use, so-called productive use, but I think that it's a very amorphous term that people often interpret in very different ways. So I thought I'd begin by asking Matthias and Clemens, you know, sort of how you define productive use. What is productive use to you?
Hi. So for me, I think productive use of energy has to do with making use of different energy sources to ensure that it creates economic value, in that it's able to help create job opportunities and then improve livelihoods of people.
Comments?
Okay, so I struggle with this term as much as probably many of you, and in some way as a provider of capital, to me that term doesn't really capture what the essence is of what we're trying to do. I mean, ultimately, we're in the business of supporting new companies in developing and implementing new business models, and as providers of credit, i.e. lenders, we need to make sure that the money comes back to our investors with a certain return. Now, ultimately, in the broader DRE space that we're looking at, what we're looking for is businesses that deliver ultimately green electrons and use those for different purposes, some of which maybe what traditionally is defined as productive use, which could be solar pumps and other machinery. But in the end, what we are looking for is business models that can catalyze the use of electricity. And we're not so much hung up about whether it's called productive use or not. We want to see businesses that grow, and with that growth, the electricity consumption will ultimately go up, which is what drives businesses, their performance, their profitability, and ultimately allows us to earn a return.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, as a mini-grid developer, everything we do is we would consider productive use, right? We are electrifying communities. We're doing appliance sales and credit financing to allow for both households and commercial users to actually take advantage of the electricity for productive purposes, but we wouldn't call it productive use. It's just part of our business. It's a utility business model with services added on that allow for greater economic activity, job creation, business creation. So, you know, for us, when that term became more current in the discussion, you know, we looked at it and said, well, this is what we've been doing for 16 years. So it's a little bit of a difficult concept for a mini-grid developer to get their head around, just because it's built into what we do from the very beginning. So we're a utility. So go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe to put this in context of how, as a financier, we approach this. I mean, Matthias, William and I sat down beforehand and discussed a little bit about this very topic, and I was trying to learn about Matthias's business. He's a social enterprise that provides cold storage for farmers in rural locations that don't have access to cold storage, right? So clearly that's a productive use conversation, but my questions to him revolve around other topics. So I go and ask him, okay, Matthias, how long have you been in business, and how are you growing your business? What is it that's required to roll out your solution? So Matthias, maybe you can repeat a little bit what you do and what it takes to scale this business.
Right. So at AkuFresh, we are a social enterprise, youth-led, that is based in Ghana. And then our goal is to ensure that we are providing renewable energy solutions to help smallholder farmers improve their livelihoods and also ensure post-harvest management. And because currently about a third of all food produced every year is lost, and just in Africa, 40% of food produced do not get to consumers. And these are as a result of lack of technology and even energy at this local level. So by offering solar-powered cold storage preservation units, we are ensuring that farmers extend shelf life of crops from 5 days to 21 days. And we are doing this at the farm gate. So we offer a decentralized solar-powered storage unit, which will help smallholder farmers to store their crops at the farm gate, helping them extend the shelf life and look for market. That is the business model. Around it is the fact that we offer this as a service using the pay-as-you-go model, where farmers get to pay 30 cents for each 20 kg crate worth of fresh produce.
So Matthias, you mentioned that you've already pivoted your business model, from more of a services-oriented model to one that's more about build, own, and transfer to local farmer collectives that actually, pay for and then operate the asset. Why? Why did you make that pivot? What forced you to make that pivot? What were the decisions that were behind that pivot?
Right, that's a very good question. So, as a very early stage social enterprise, one challenge we faced, with even regards to speaking to investors, is that they do not really see economic growth because it costs a lot to set up our product. Who will now finance the product. So they buy the product from our end, we manage it for 1 year, and then train local community members to take ownership. So they buy the product from our end, we manage it for 1 year, and then train local community members to take ownership of it. And also looking at farmer cooperatives who will be able to also make an initial deposit of the to own the storage unit, and then have a payment plan with support from local banks and other institutions to be able to help them manage it. With this, it is us that kind of burden of now going to look for money to set up the units and then scale.
So,
thank you.
So I'm going to jump in here because I think here we get to the real challenge of what we're all trying to address. I mean, clearly, providing cold storage, it has to be a good thing. Overall, there's no debate about it. We manage both credit funds that can lend to a business like this, and we're also a manager of a venture fund that supports early stage businesses. So I turn around to Matthias and say, okay, we have a fund that can give you $5 million in loans to scale up your business, but in order to do that, we require a certain amount of equity, i.e. owner's capital in the deal. So I go to him and say, you come up with $2 million of equity, and then we can have a discussion about $5 million of debt. And then Matthias turns to me and says, this is great, but I mean, getting equity is really difficult, and we've started talking to a number of venture capital funds out there. Yeah. So then I change my hat, take off my credit hat, and put on my venture hat, and I said to him, okay, Matthias, so I'm on the investment committee of our venture fund. The first question I ask when I get presented a deal is how quickly can you grow, and what kind of multiple on my investment am I going to get? And I said to him, by the way, in this current environment, my fellow IC members are very wary of very asset-intensive business models that need, in addition to venture equity, need a whole bunch of credit. So then I turned back to Matthias and asked him what he's going to do. But maybe rather than ask him and put him on the spot, I'm going to turn to William, because he's gone through this process, and maybe he can give a little bit of better insights into how this process of starting a venture takes you on a road to ultimately having a functioning and profitable business, I hope.
So, well, let me ask you first. So, I mean, you, I believe, have a development mandate within your fund, correct, in Sygnum?
Mm-hmm.
So who defined for you, or did you find for yourself, this focus on asset-light versus asset-heavy business models? Because mini-grids are also an asset-heavy business. We struggle to raise equity and debt just like you do, Matthias. But I'm curious, if you don't mind, like, what is the development finance community, what's their thesis, and how did that come about? Is it the LPs who are driving that? Is it you that's driving that? Where does that point of view come from?
That's an excellent question, actually, because the investors in our venture fund are development finance institutions that would all subscribe to the developmental outcomes and the necessities of a business like Matthias's or mini-grids. At the same time, the venture model follows a very specific trajectory of generating returns for its investors. It relies on sort of relatively rapid growth. It also requires most companies to be able to transact outside of their home market, which typically is too small to gain, but to allow them to gain the size that they can ultimately exit at the valuations that's required for a typical venture-funded model. I think of it as a first-stage investment, a seed investment followed by 2 or 3 rounds of capital. At each stage, the venture capital universe requires the valuation to go up by a factor of, I mean, name it, 3 to 5 times. So you quickly see that for a company to be successful, a venture investor needs to see being able to have a valuation of $100 million. Yeah, I'm picking some relatively random numbers in orders of magnitude. Yeah, then I can look at, and so that's not necessarily imposed on us by the development community that funds us. It's the way the market works, because even development finance institutions want their money back, and in the venture world, that's the way to an exit.
Well, we could have a longer conversation about the development finance community and whether they're headed in the right direction, but we'll leave that aside for now. To answer your question, I mean, mini-grids, I think most mini-grid companies start in our industry by thinking just about supply, and thinking that if you can generate and sell electrons, that you'll be able to cover your costs and make a profit. In rural communities, peri-urban communities where there's relatively little economic activity, that's a non-starter. We learned that the hard way. We almost failed as a company. And what we came to realize was that unless you focus both on supply and demand, that you can't come to a profitable business model. And demand for me is essentially productive use, right? Whether it's household or business, if you can create that demand and actually allow for those communities to be productive, then you've solved a big part of your problem, is making sure that you're sweating that asset and using the electricity generation asset to its fullest as much as possible. So that was a really seminal moment for us in terms of realizing, okay, if you're going to do this, you have to look at both the generation side and the demand side, and make sure that those two things are very much aligned.
Yeah, and maybe to pick up on what you said about the sort of the broader financial community, I guess the shortcomings that we are responsible for is that in order to balance supply and demands, there are enough factors outside of everybody's control. We need to be able to provide some visibility on where the financing can come from.
Yeah.
And that is difficult, and we haven't done a good enough job, and I'm sure critical to yours and your success.
Matthias, we've talked about, raising equity as being one challenge for you. What are the other major challenges that you face as a young startup?
Right. So some of the challenges have to be working with grassroots, people at the grassroots level, because sometimes it's a challenge for people at the grassroots to be able to adapt to modern technology. So you have to usually spend more time trying to educate and create awareness, and also get people to buy into the idea, because you wouldn't want to develop a solution that will end up not being used. Of course, they face a problem, but then if you do not really offer that kind of awareness, it becomes difficult for them to accept the product. So that is usually a challenge that we face, because people usually at that level tend not to adapt easily to modern technology. So that is one challenge. And another challenge has to do with sourcing equipment, because it's usually expensive. I mean, as a mini-grid company, you understand that it's really huge investment, especially investing in renewable energy. So that high upfront cost, and even sourcing the materials, and the materials not being available locally in that quantity is also a challenge. So we end up spending time looking for the equipment we need to put together our technology. That also becomes a challenge in terms of scaling.
But I want to ask you. So, what's the thing preventing you, or presenting a challenge to you to invest more capital in this space? Because it's been identified as a market opportunity worth tens of billions of dollars, right? So that's a huge opportunity. Why not invest more?
So I was just about to ask you. Yeah. So we hear of all these challenges, and based on Husk, how take you to get on top of these challenges and get to the stage where this business was per se on a stable ground?
Well, I think so the current version of the company is about 10 years old. It's taken us about 8 years to get there.
Okay, so that's part of your answer, right? We're looking at a lot of businesses like Matthias's, and we know that on average, in this ecosystem that we work in, companies take 8 to 10 years to reach profitability. So he tells me it's going to take him 3 years. Yeah, I add a little bit of fat to it, because I know nothing ever works out the way it does. So I'm already having to plan for a business that needs continuously needs to access capital for the next 5 to 8 years. This is going to be through I don't know how many macro cycles in which investors come and go. Yeah. So that is my problem. I have not enough visibility on the future to know that if I put money in now, someone's going to come and follow in 3 years' time to take the business to the next level.
Yeah.
And I would like to hear your solution to that.
Yeah, no, so I mean, one of the things I was going to say, even for a growth stage company like us, we deploy our capital to build assets so that we can electrify people. If we're going to add any additional value-added services like productive use into what we do, we still need grant capital to de-risk those business models. And I would say, and Matthias, you disagree with me if you like, I haven't seen a whole lot of productive use business models that have scaled commercially. And maybe e-mobility, maybe irrigation, but we've tried cold storage, we've tried rice milling, we've tried e-mobility, we've tried many different things, but we still don't know ourselves what's scalable and commercially viable. So anyway, I think I'm being asked to wrap up, so I want to make sure that we leave a little bit of time. So we're here for Mission 300, right? This big initiative, productive use is part of it. I'd like to ask you both what you'd like to see from Mission 300 to help your business or investments perform the way that you'd like them to.
Yes, let me start, and then Matthias can give the final touch to it. I think there are two themes that I think are very critical and fit very well into this whole event. Yeah, one is time. Yeah, we spend too much time deliberating over how we do things, and not enough time trying to get to solutions. So we need to shorten that 10 years to a much smaller time horizon. And the other thing is we need to grow markets. And we need to grow markets by allowing businesses like Matthias to expand, whether it's from Ghana to Nigeria or across the continent, in a much more seamless way, so that the addressable market gets bigger, the opportunity gets bigger, and capital is more excited about where the journey could end.
Right. For me, I think Mission 300 should also prioritize collaborating with younger organizations, because usually what we usually see is most of these initiatives work with really large organizations, and it doesn't really give younger organizations that kind of experience as well. So when you go to investors like Clems, they always want to say, okay, what previous experience do you have, or how does your book look like? We do not really need very large capital, but at least if we are also plugged into a certain portion of implementing certain projects, it gives us that experience and that credibility to be able to reach out to more people for them to understand that what we are doing actually works to some extent, and then they're able to sort of give us that support. So plugging in younger organizations in this initiative is something that I think it should be a great game changer, so that investors like Clems will be able to support.
Okay, listen up, Mission 300. Matthias needs your support, so let's figure that out. Thank you both for an excellent conversation. Quick, short and sweet, as they say. Thanks so much.
Right.
Yeah, right on time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Un grand merci à nos...
A big thank you to our panelists and the moderator for the quality of their interventions. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we said that we will have successive panels. We have a lot to say this afternoon, and we will move on to a panel discussion called Mobilizing the Civil Society, and it will highlight the civil society actors in energizing Africa. To moderate this discussion, I am pleased to call Mr. Semkai Kilonzo, Executive Director of the Policy Forum in Tanzania. He is a well-known leader because of his engagement for participatory and inclusive solutions, and he will be moderating discussions between Ms. Sheila Oparaucha, Director of Energia, and Ms. Hadiza Abdul Mumini, Global Focal Point, SDG 7 Youth Constituency from Nigeria. Kindly welcome our moderator as well as the two panelists. A warm round of applause, please. Thank you.
For our panel.
How do you operate this?
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Semkai Kilonzo. I am from the Policy Forum, which is a network of civil society organizations working on governance and accountability here in Tanzania. We've got our network has about over 80 organizations brought together in their interest on issues around poverty reduction, equity, and democratization. So that's things around engaging civil society to energize Africa, which is our topic for this panel, is one of the key things that help reduce poverty reduction. So just really quickly to introduce the topic, we know Africa, and we've heard this morning and through the course of today, that Africa faces significant challenges in ensuring universal access to sustainable energy, and civil society organizations have emerged as critical agents, and they have a key role to play as agents of change in terms of contributing to policy advocacy, issues around their work with community-based solutions. Most of the times we've seen very good examples of innovative work being done, and their efforts to make energy access more inclusive. And last but not least, obviously, a huge role that they play in bringing government to account, duty bearers to account for the promises that they make. So without further ado, I'd like to let you know that we've got distinguished panelists here who will have stories and strategies of how civil society and youth can amplify their voices in energy policy and collaboration with key stakeholders. My first panelist is Sheila Oparaucha. She's a leader in gender and energy, works for an organization called Energia, and has about 26 years experience in women's empowerment in energy access. The second is Hadiza Abdul-Mumini, and she's also done quite impactful work promoting youth leadership and equitable clean energy access and advancing clean cooking practices in Nigeria, and she's a global focal point for the SDG 7 in Nigeria. So really quickly, I'd just like to jump right in it. I have questions for both of you. First is, what inspired each of you to engage in the energy? Africa. I'll start with you, Sheila.
Thank you, thank you. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the introduction, and I'm humbled that you call me a leader. So it's an honor for me to be on this panel and to contribute to the discussion and discourse taking place at M300. To be honest, my entry into the energy sector was not particularly exciting. I was fresh out of university, an opportunity provided itself, and so I took that opportunity. But over the years, what has been more fascinating for me is to draw the parallels between my first job, which was a veterinary doctor after graduating from the University of Zambia, and my work at the intersection of gender and energy, supported by my second degree from the Asian Institute of Technology and Gender and Development Planning. What surprised me is that in both, you have to go beyond the obvious. When you're treating an animal, which is a client who doesn't speak to you, or when you are trying to address the challenges of women empowerment in the energy sector, what's obvious is the root causes, and what's obvious on the surface is not always the real picture. So when I take a gender lens to technical solutions, I'm forced to ask critical questions. Who is benefiting? Who controls the decisions over use? What are the power dynamics between those who have and those who do not have? And that's what really keeps me excited and keeps me motivated. Thank you.
Okay, and Hadiza, same question, but you also, a follow-up question would be, how do you see the role of civil society and youth organizations in shaping Africa's energy policy?
Okay, thank you. I think the inspiration for me was mostly because of the lack of stable access to electricity in my country. Growing up, electricity was not stable, and the frustration for that would be just because you're unable to watch maybe some of your kids' shows, cartoons, and all of that. But as I was growing older, it became to be a bigger problem because you're unable to really work. It threatens your work. These days, most of the work are virtually. You need your computer. And oftentimes, you are scared because you have a meeting and there's no electricity for you to power these gadgets that you have to use to attend the meetings. And then you come to see that it's even beyond the individual perspectives. It's even for the country itself, Nigeria. You see a lot of companies just piking up their investment and leaving because the profit is just going back to getting diesel to power up generators, and that's just not profitable. So I thought, what's the best thing I can do? Because if others can have stable electricity, then we can also have stable electricity. So I did the best way I know how, which is law and policy. And this is the shot of my own inspiration. Then in terms of the role of civil society organizations and youth organizations, I believe they play a very critical role in shaping Africa's energy future. And this is because you see that across the globe, youths in Africa, for instance, they are taking so much leadership in terms of exploring what are the sustainable energy solutions that are available. And together with these organizations, you see advocacy and policy influence. So they look at what are the best ways, what policies would enable us to promote and prioritize energy access? How can we expand sustainable energy solutions? So this is very, very important. And then secondly, they're able to hold the government accountable for, and private institutions accountable for their energy-related actions and policies. And then you talk about skilling and awareness. So let me give you an example with what we do in terms of awareness. So before I became the global focal point of the SH7 Youth Constituency, I was the regional focal point for West and Central Africa. So as a regional focal point, our responsibility is first to see what are those immediate needs in the organization for your own region. And the first thing we saw was for West and Central Africa, it's even very important for us to begin with the awareness in terms of what are those communities that don't even have energy access? Then what are the alternative sources? There's a lot of problems, for instance, in my own country with the transmission lines. So there's a need for you to really raise awareness on the need for decentralized energy solutions. So the first thing we did at that level was awareness campaign, the sustainable sources available, the consequences of all of these sources, among others. So this is in terms of awareness, one of the responsibilities. And then secondly, you also talk about fostering skilling, and after skilling, innovation. So right now, as the global focal point of the constituency, the role is to see what are the best ways to support youth. And one very important and interesting program we have is the Youth Sustainable Energy Hub. So it's a hub that gives room to all youths across the globe to come and showcase the youth-led energy projects that they have. And right now, what we are planning to do is to showcase them based on region, and they get access to capacity building, financing, mentorship, and some of the partners for these programs that we've had, IRENA, IEA, REN21, UN Energy, SE4All, among others. So this is one of the areas that you see youth organizations and civil society organizations creating that opportunity and allowing for a just and inclusive transition and also energy access. And then this is the same thing for skilling too. You look at areas that youth don't have skills and we're able to work with.
Okay, thank you. Now back to Sheila. Do you have examples of how civil society can play an effective role in energy policy?
Yes. Actually, my fellow speaker has already said everything that I want to say and also given excellent examples. But let me just, there's a saying, you have to know where you're coming from to know where you're going. And I think it's important if we step back, whether it is 2015 or 2021, when we had the World Summit of Sustainable Development and you couldn't talk about energy poverty, 2015 when you have the SDGs, on going forward, that civil society organizations were the first to start talking about, for instance, decentralized renewable energy, clean cooking solutions, before our governments and our private sector came on board. So I think it's very good to recognize that. And having said that, we're here in Tanzania, so I'll just give two examples. Tatedo. You cannot work in the energy sector if you don't know about Tatedo. Tatedo has been a shining example for over 30 years, really bringing inclusive business models, testing them, making them proven business models. A lot of that we're using today, whether we're talking about multifunctional platforms that they started with, to mini-grids, to now using electric cooking and trying to make that affordable. So that's 30 years. The Tanzania Sustainable Energy and Gender Network, really working on empowering, creating a much more enabling policy environment for women in the energy sector, have been catalytic in working in partnership with the Ministry of Energy in Tanzania in developing the Sustainable for All Gender Action Plan. And right now are also innovating in village-level adaptation plans, not national, but village-level adaptation plans really driven by villages and aggregating them so that they can feed into district-level planning. Nigeria. I saw Habiba today, so I'm going to be remiss if I don't mention Society Renewable Energy Technologies and Solar Sisters. You know, when we talk about CSOs, it's not just NGOs. Yeah. We had mini-grids developers here saying they're not making profits. They are also part of the CSOs. Here, these are two organizations that over 10 years or more have empowered thousands of women entrepreneurs in very rural and remote areas in Nigeria where nobody else is. Nobody else is in these communities. I've been there to get business skills, deliver clean energy products, and even be innovative with digital literacy. Currently, Solar Sister is piloting a solar mill machine based in local communities, so you don't have to transport things, the long travel and the distance that women have to take in order to transport in their farming products to mill. So those are two. And of course, your own organization that's working on accountability in the country.
Thank you. Sheila, again, just a follow-up question. How can gender considerations drive more inclusive and sustainable energy access outcomes?
Okay. Thank you for the question. So inclusive and sustainable outcomes, that's what we want to focus on. So within Energy's experience, we feel that there are 4 critical approaches. The first one is to end energy poverty for women. UN Women has said in their snapshot for 2024, and by the way, this year is the 30th celebration of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action that our member states committed to women's economic empowerment and gender equality. The last year that SDG 5 is going to be reviewed, but their report is still showing us the majority of poor women in the world are based in the continent, and the majority of those poor women are energy poor. So ending energy poverty is really important. A very interesting statistics that I saw was is that for every 100 men, there are 127 women. Now, what's interesting is the age group, and they're living in extreme poverty. So there are different levels of poverty. This is the group between 25 and 34. That means for the years that are supposed to be your most productive is the years that you cannot not afford or access energy. So that's going to be one. So we need targeted interventions, gender interventions that really put women at the center of, for instance, our Mission 300 contacts. And why I say intentional is because I recognize when our one of our moderators was speaking to our ministers, one of the questions she asked, if you're in the room, is about women's empowerment and gender equality. She added it into the questions, and none of our ministers answered that question. So we really do have to be intentional in making this difference. So that's one. The second one, I want to go beyond markets. Social safety networks. Let's be honest, there's still a large percentage of our population that are not going to afford even the most basic. We heard from the World Bank president that energy is a public good, it is a right. So social safety nets for those who cannot afford, social security safety nets for those who cannot afford, is really going to be critical. We also heard from the last speakers about how local communities are considered risk averse to adopting some of these technologies. That's not the case. It's not all about behavioral science. It's because they have very vulnerable incomes. You know, they have very little buffer for economic shocks. Right. So then if you're going to take something and you're thinking, how am I going to pay for it? How am I going to pay it off? You're going to be, of course, you're going to think twice before you take it on. If we have social safety networks that will allow people to afford this, it's really going to be important. So apart from the market, we also have to think of these other things. I know that you're asking me to finish. I'm going to just say two statements. I'm looking at my good friend, Dimfna. And I think on this panel where we have CSOs, we do have to repeat it. We have to think of holistically about SDG 7. SDG 7 has universal access to energy, which is universal access to clean cooking and universal access to electricity. So we need to have both. You can't do one before the other. Okay. We know that, so electricity needs to be a trailblazer for bringing clean cooking. And clean cooking because it saves lives. In fact, my 26 years of experience is going to allow me to be so bold as to say, if you do not have clean cooking in your initiative, it's a gender-blind initiative. It's going to increase inequalities. It's not pro-women. All right. So, okay, I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's bring youth into this. Hadiza, youth play a key role, obviously. How can we enhance the inclusivity of youth voices in the energy spaces?
Okay, thank you. I think one stark reality that we must acknowledge, which is why I'm so happy for this question, is at the tables where critical policies are being shaped, you simply do not find youth voices. You simply do not find youth there. And it's not because they don't want to be there. And youth have fresh perspectives, innovative ideas, and they hold the long-term impact of these policies that are being shaped today. They are rather seen as passive beneficiaries instead of the agent of change that they are, or the partners in shaping these policies. And I believe some of the reasons for these marginalizations is because maybe there's lack of trust in the capabilities of youth, or maybe there's no resources to engage them, or there's no knowledge of all these initiatives and activities that youth are putting to show their interest and their need to really shape all these policies that are being made. Now, these are my recommendations in terms of how youth can really be made inclusive and to help shape these policies. One is to have a formal youth engagement mechanism, a youth advisory council. And this was the case I saw in the UAE. In the UAE, United Arab Emirates, both public institutions, private institutions, government institutions, all these institutions, they are required by law to have a youth advisory body. So for every policy that they make, you know that it has the perspectives of the younger generations contained therein. Then secondly, if the fear or the reason for not engaging youth is because there's fear of, or there's doubt as to their capabilities, then train them. Recently, I serve as the co-chair of the Arena Youth Council. Then we organized the Arena Youth Forum along the sidelines of the Arena Assembly. And a lot of youth from over 50 countries came. There was a lot of, it was very, very intensive, but there was a lot of opportunities for youth, and they were able to be merged together with leading experts in the energy sector. And one thing that I realized was the UAE youths, they stood out. Some of them in the workshops I attended, they have served as negotiators, and they were sort of giving a workshop on that. They were aware of their country's NDCs, of their country's energy plans, so they have that sense of ownership. If you are able to train the youths and make them understand what the position is, then you give them that sense of ownership and you get to have more out of them. And then secondly, all these youth organizations, CSOs, invest in them so they could further amplify their impact. And then lastly, for emissions such as Mission 300, I think it's very important that we have a platform that removes all this geographical barrier, an online platform that allows you to have all the youths there. So at all times, from the beginning, middle, up until the end, you get to ask, and you hear without any filter, what are their thoughts, how is it going, what are their suggestions on this project. I believe this way is able to bring up youth inclusion.
Yeah, we just have a minute and a half, so I'll just jump to the last question for both of you. How do you think civil society can better collaborate with the other stakeholders, government and private sector? Yeah, you've got a minute for both of you.
Okay. So I'll just be quick then. Okay, so I believe the collaboration is very essential, as we're all aware, but oftentimes it doesn't happen because of some barriers, lack of trust, lack of communication, bureaucracy, red tape hindering of project implementation, or just different priorities and agendas. So if this, all these barriers could be removed, then the rules of the civil society organizations, youth organizations can then they'll be able to work collaboratively with the government. The government does the policies, the private sector brings the investment, and the CSOs are willing to go to the grassroots level. And for all this role, for instance, of the CSOs, you have the policy advocacy, skilling, fostering innovation. If they're able to do it together and work as one, it will have more impact. Oftentimes you see that the skilling itself, the government officials, they do need it. Sometimes for these policies that are being made, you see that the CSOs can bring that evidence from the grassroots engagement that they've had, and you have policies that are more effective.
Thank you. Sheila, same question.
Yes, a minute and a half, but because this is the only, I think there are only 2 spaces in this conference where civil society is, please allow me to add an extra minute. I think we are entitled to that. So we're going to be remiss if to respond to your last question about youth empowerment and women's empowerment if we don't talk about jobs and leaderships. We saw examples of wonderful leaders, including Her Excellency, the president of the country that's hosting us, but there are too few women in the sector. And as jobs are being created in the clean energy transition, this could go to youth and women. But also very much, from our experience, it's not so much on the supply side. Yes, we need to promote STEM education, but it's on when they get into these positions that the environment needs to be made safe for them to excel. So we're talking about anti-harassment policies, we're talking about equal opportunity policies. These are things that we really need to encourage in our sector. And now about civil society, I want to first, and I think we're all going to do that, we are going to underscore and acknowledge the engagement that we have on the 20th of January with Mission, with the Mission 300 initiative, where a statement was already made. So all our points were captured there. And just to underscore that, it was about inclusive multi-stakeholder processes and providing real leadership linked to that. It was about openness and trust in the relationships that we have. And part of that was really sharing timely information that we need. It was about funding our NGOs, particularly youth and women's organizations, but also community-based, to meaningfully engage in these. They do also need to have part of the funding, part of the billions that have been allocated should also go to civil society organizations. And the fourth is actually a shout out to us CSOs, and to CSOs like myself, the more established, more international, that we need to give way to our local African CSOs to lead the way. Let us come in and support them so that we together can have a collective voice. Rather than engaging in these initiatives one-on-one, we need to have a collective voice and really be, that will strengthen our position.
Can we end there?
Okay. So I'll end.
All right. Sheila and Adisa, please, a warm round of applause for them. It's been excellent.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, and there you have it, the voice of civil society, loud and clear in the room. Thank you very much for your contributions, and to our moderator and our panelists. Again, we're moving at lightning speed, ladies and gentlemen, as we move to our next short and sharp, concise conversation. Its focuses on innovative finance, and particularly wanting to also include a perspective on local currency. It's my pleasure to welcome the CEO of the British International Investment. That is, of course, Mr. Leslie Marsdorp. Thank you for being here, Leslie. And joining him on stage is Jules Ngakam, the CEO of the Africa Guarantee Fund. Welcome, Jules. And Rachel More Oshodi, the CEO of ArmHerith, in particular the ArmHerith Infrastructure Investment Limited, rather. Ladies and gentlemen, we hand over now to Leslie to lead us in this conversation. Leslie, over to you.
Thank you very much, moderator, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Like all the other sessions before this one, I believe that innovative finance is the most important subject for us over this conference, this summit. I say that because there is a search underway. We are going back to the laboratories, if you like, to find new ways, to find ways in which we can reinvigorate, retool the development finance system to deal with the modern challenges that we face today. I mean, as a starting point, as you know, dating back way back to 1944, when the development finance system was really established with the World Bank. Since then, with only $20 billion of paid-in capital, more than $1 trillion have been raised through the power of leverage through the capital markets. 20 years ago or so, in Monterrey in Mexico, the concept of innovative finance was really sort of born. It was captured in the final communique of the Finance for Development Summit, and since then there's been considerable innovation. We've had blended finance structures, we've had green and sustainability bonds, we've had IFM, for example, create a set of instruments where we were able to raise through advanced market commitments specific bonds, which is really what led to Gavi becoming one of the most successful public-private partnerships over the last 2 decades. However, there's still a significant financing gap. So we're here to talk about that subject, and I'm joined by 2 very esteemed panelists who have very deep experience, each more than 20 years of experience in investment banking, private equity, and development finance. So we want to drill more into that concept today. I'll start with you, Rachel. Rachel is the CEO of ArmHerith Infrastructure Investments. And I want to ask you, what do you see as the remaining to investment in the energy sector? And afterwards, I'll come to what solutions do you think we can propose?
Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Before I delve into what the issues are, just want to specify exactly what we do at ARM Harith. So we are a private equity firm focused on investing in essential infrastructure assets across West Africa. So from access to energy to efficient transport and connectivity, we focus on projects that have the potential to deliver strong returns to investors, as well as a major impact on the communities. So what we've faced over the years, of course, doing infrastructure, is that we're dealing with a very volatile environment, from regulations to our currencies, to the landscape and access to finance. The key issues, especially when dealing with long-dated assets, is that uncertainty is what has prevented really the investing at scale. So even when you are a sophisticated investor, what you are faced with is, from the investor community in providing or looking at those investments, what they're shying away from is the key point really is the volatility. We've gone through devaluations, we've gone through changing regimes, so we've sophisticated our approach in structuring around that. But even at that, what you can do is to limit the losses, but you cannot eliminate them. And so we also coming in very early. Being equity, we're coming at a point at the project cycle when things are still being put in place. There's very few capital that have the patience and the risk appetite to do that. And that has also been another pain point that we haven't yet solved. Lastly, talking about the illiquid nature of that. A lot of investors and people will mention pension funds in particular when you look at developed market, because the long-term nature of those assets should be a great match for the pension funds. However, for the risk that I've mentioned and for the illiquid nature of the asset we invest in, because it would take you 2 to 3 years to develop a project, another 2 to 3 years to build that project before the assets start generating cash flows. So it's a long time for pension funds not to receive any distribution, and that also has been one of the challenges that we face. Lastly, and I'll stop there, the currency, as I mentioned. One way to mitigate it is, of course, to have the local currency being able to match that of the revenues of the project. But what we face is that the market, the banking market, or at least the investor market, the financing market, generally speaking, is not deep enough to provide the long tenors that are required and the quantum that is required for those very capital-intensive projects.
Thank you very much, Rachel. I'd like now to move over to Jules Ngangam, who is the CEO of the Africa Guarantee Fund. How is the fund responding to these challenges with respect to the solutions that you believe you are offering the market?
Okay, thank you, Leslie. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, so we started a point on the barriers because at AGF, the product that we are offering were designed to address those barriers. And when we talk about barriers for investment in the GRE, on the renewable, is as opposed to traditional investment, because all sort of investment, they have their own barriers. But when it comes specifically to the renewable sector, I would say the main challenge is liquidity, is this arbitrage between CapEx and OpEx. You know, investors, they will tend to go for projects that have a lower CapEx but higher OpEx. Because what we are telling them is that upfront they need to invest a huge amount of money, but they will get the payback over a long period of time. The next challenge is mainly on the duration. You know, the duration is the fact that the payback period is quite long, and we have a mismatch between the type of resources that the investors have, the tenor, compared to the tenor of the project. We have the collateral, which is a major one. You know, when it comes to the renewable, the investors tend to apply a high haircut to the collateral value of the equipment. You know, the way they assess the equipment, the collateral value is it kind of easy to resell those equipment in the secondary market? And is very challenging to resell those type of equipment. And when it comes also to the issue around the maintenance, and because of that, the depreciation ratio for equipment in the renewable sector tend to be very high, so they depreciate those equipment kind of very fast. Rachel mentioned the currency challenge, the information, lack of information. So our product have been designed to address liquidity, the duration challenge, the lack of information, and our product goes mainly around guarantees. So we have loan guarantees in a portfolio basis, individual basis, depending on the size of the transaction, because we want to cover the entire value chain when it comes to the energy space, from the very small SMEs to the medium one. And the loan guarantee helps to address the issue of collateral. We do provide also the bank fundraising guarantee to help those investors to provide long-term finance to the SMEs to reduce the mismatch in terms of duration. We have the equity guarantee, which is a very critical one because we have realized that they kind of rely heavily on debt finance. So we do also attract investment on the equity space, to be able to help them to have long-term financing.
Thank you very much, Jules. Now, let me come back to Rachel. Over the years, British International Investment have found that the availability of local currency is a central ingredient of being successful in a number of markets on the African continent. You run a multi-currency fund. How important is the local currency offering in your view?
Thanks. It is critical. And for the second fund that we're raising is the key element, really, that we're focusing on. Why? Because for the first fund, we did take investors in local currency, but then converted it in hard currency because there were so many issues at the time that we couldn't fix. And today we are proud to say that we are able to invest local currency into local projects alongside international capital because sometimes the two don't necessarily match. And the risk profile of the investors are also different. Mm-hmm. So that's truly the blended nature of what we've been able to do.
So you're able to bring in sort of local pension funds, local institutions into those investments?
Absolutely. Seeing eye to eye as to how the capital, because really what we do is really take the right kind of capital for the right type of projects and in the right capital structure. Yeah. And that's the most efficient way to really leverage both local and international. So we've learned, and we've learned from discussing with the pension funds, and I did mention the illiquid nature, right? Even when you look at developed market, it took the pension funds a long time to get to where they are today. Today we see them owning assets, but they were first very hesitant about that until they were able to master it. And there's a lot that needs to happen at the regulatory level. And because we are not there yet, all markets within where we operate are not there yet. So what we do is that we're very selective in the type of project that we do, where we know we can minimize the impact of regulation, if not eliminate it fully by engaging bilaterally. So we've learned lessons the hard way, but what we are able to do is to really bring both the local currency, the hard currency, so how we source equipment, where we locate the project, how do we use civil work, and why do we need to go and put dollars against it when we can do it locally? So it also encouraging to start building industries locally. So it's critical, and I think it's really a game changer, and we would not be able to do that if we didn't have concessional capital, or junior equity, essentially. Yeah. So what the DFIs are doing is supporting fund managers like us to really de-risk those projects, because as sophisticated as we are as fund managers and having done a lot of projects on the continent, we do not control the monetary policies. We do not control the regulation. We can, of course, influence that by bringing the private sector perspective in those discussions. And we don't also control the fact that by nature, those projects take a long time to get on stream. Yeah. But to enable and attract pension funds, in spite of that, we need to have a capital that is patient and that could take the first loss.
Thank you.
Right? So this is quite critical. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Jules, I wonder if I could ask you whether you think that the moment has now arrived where guarantees have really kind of, if you like, getting the moment in the sun. I mean, as you know, Ajay Banga, one of his first initiatives was to establish a private sector lab, and one of their first recommendations was bringing together the guarantee product of the World Bank, the IFC, IDA, and it looks like there's now a clear recognition that guarantees have a significant role to play to mobilize private sector capital. Are you very confident that that moment has arrived now for guarantees to be much more central to the finance offering for development finance?
Yes, absolutely. I think the time has come to leverage more on this type of product, and I will mainly give the case of AGF, why we believe that today we are well positioned, we are best positioned to tackle the challenge when it comes to the renewable space. So I'll give you maybe 5 main reasons. The first one is on the product. We launched the Green Guarantee Facility a decade ago, and we are in a position where we have a track record on what works best. So we believe that at the product level today, we have a product that was designed to tackle the challenge facing that sector. The second reason is our coverage, our continental coverage. We've signed guarantees in 44 countries in Africa, and then we believe that by partnering with the GFI, those SMEs, they prefer to borrow in hard currency. Is the cost. It's cheaper to borrow in hard currency where they don't see the currency risk. If we can lower also the interest rate for the investment in local currency, will play a huge role. And we believe that by leveraging on our rating, the financial institution can achieve that. Yes, and the last one is the leverage. The fact that with $1 of resources, we can channel $10 of private capital to the players in the GI space.
Thank you very much. Rachel, if I could return to you, I mean, we have private sector players, institutions here in the room. What would you say are the sort of core propositions why investors should, for example, who are interested in the ARM Harith Infrastructure Fund, why should they invest? What's the core proposition that you are putting forward?
Thank you for that. So I think it's really the fact that we have boots on the ground and solving for the issues hands-on. So for every single evolution, I guess, in our industry, you need to have new products. And I'll give an example. I was mentioning that investors, particularly the local investors, and the reason why I'm insisting on the pension funds is that right now, it is probably what could bridge the gap for setting this infrastructure play that we're all talking about, because there's a lot of capital that is there that could be unlocking what we're trying to do. And so, to give an example on the illiquid nature of the assets, we realized that it was a key pain point for them, more so than the returns. So we collaborated with the DFI in order to have a pocket of capital that would not necessarily be first loss, but that would provide early yield to those pension funds. It's never been done, right? So we needed to do that to unlock that particular capital, and they welcomed that with open arms, and now we are having more local investors coming in, because now they don't have the pain point of waiting 5 to 6 years before getting the first distribution, right? So those kind of example is truly being agile, really having boots on the ground and understanding what are the issues, and having the network to bring stakeholders together to co-create solutions so we can keep moving forward while we fix the bigger issues at the macro level.
Jules, if I could ask you the same question. If you were sitting in front of potential investors, donors, institutions, what is the core proposition why they should put money into the Africa Guarantee Fund?
Yes, so the core proposition is our ability to mobilize private capital. Because we believe that GFI alone, donor, they will never have enough resources to address the challenges that we face in the energy space. So we need to mobilize or channel the private capital that sits in Africa in the banking sector. And this is our core value proposition as AGF, because with our guarantee product, with our technical assistance, we have the tools, we have the capacity, the rating, the leverage to channel enough capital from the private sector where it's needed.
Thank you very much. We've unfortunately run out of time. I'll just make a couple of very brief remarks in summary. I mean, as you have heard, there's considerable momentum today in terms of finding new solutions for our institutions to become laboratories, if you like, to search for new ideas of how to finance development. We know that traditional sources of finance are too limited. Overseas development aid is too limited and constrained. So we have to go back to the drawing boards. And the only way to go back to the drawing boards is to find instruments and ways to leverage and to mobilize the institutional investor capital that sits in sovereign wealth funds, that sits in pension funds, that sits in insurance companies. But the traditional sort of methods of doing that have not succeeded, especially on the African continent, where the markets are still perceived to be too risky. And I'd like to just end off by saying two sentences about British international investment. We have been on the continent for many, many decades, and specifically have a unique positioning in terms of deploying equity, the riskiest part of the capital structure, making equity investments in many African countries, because we take this very long-term view and want to contribute to long-term deepening of financial markets, deepening and strengthening of the capital markets, because that's the only way really to have sustainable long-term development. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and I'll give it back to the moderator.
Thank you very much. Un grand merci à notre modérateur.
Huge thanks to the moderator and the panelists, a very dynamic panel for all the aspects shared with such great precision. We will be continuing our series of discussions on this platform, and we were going to tackle a very significant issue, the future of the sector. We are going to be looking at the necessary transformations to build a prosperous energy future for the continent. So, ladies and gentlemen, and to moderate this session.
Thank you very much. Et donc, ce que je disais, c'est que pour moi.
So, what I was saying was that to moderate the next discussions, I have the pleasure to invite on stage Kapi Osbik, the Commercial Director of Africa Green Co. It's a pioneer organization providing solutions in Africa, and they'll be accompanied by eminent people, Alain Obisse, Africa 50, an investment fund which is catalyzing growth. Then you have Tadesse, is a head of TDI. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, and welcome the next panelist on stage, Alain Obisse, Tadesse, and Taxi.
Alors, c'est étrange, mais j'ai l'impression.
It's strange. I have the impression that the members of the panel are not yet ready, so we will wait for them for some minutes. I have seen someone going to look for them, so I will ask you to be patient for some time. Why not discuss with your neighbor what has been said in the previous session? So we will give them some time.
energy, but also mini grids, off grids. And we have clients here in Tanzania who've made good use of some of those facilities. This is long-term funding. We can go 15 years. This is for private sector SME lending, right? So if you go back 5 years ago, none of these facilities existed. So, I mean, there's real practical examples that we can point to that shows that